Welcome to X-Files Podcast, a podcast about breakups, broken hearts, and moving on. I'm Janice Formicella, a breakup coach passionate about supporting others to heal from their breakups, overcome loneliness, love being single, and see the end of a relationship as the beginning of a magical new chapter in life. I am here each week to share with you the tools that I have learned through my own painful breakups, through hitting rock bottom more than once, and through working with people all around the world to heal their broken hearts. If you are looking for hope and strength to move on from your breakup and resources to enjoy your new single life, you are in the right place, and I've got your back. Hello, dear listeners. Today I have another interview as part of my Sexual Health Awareness Month series. While September has ended, it was recorded during that month. I decided that I would release it today instead of last week, as I had so much great content for Sexual Health Awareness Month, and because I needed to practice a bit of self-care and clear my plate just a bit last week. But even though Sexual Health Awareness Month has ended, this is a timeless topic, and the interview is with a brilliant practitioner, and I know you will love it. Before we get started, I want you to know that if you are struggling to process or to put your breakup behind you, that I have 3 openings in my coaching schedule. This is more than I've had in a while, and I would love you to take one of them. One-on-one support is a highly effective way to turn a corner on your healing, and I know that you will end our work together feeling that your breakup was a blessing in disguise and that you are ready to welcome this new chapter of life. If you'd like to work with me, all you have to do is send me a DM on Instagram or email xfilespodcast@gmail.com. I will send you information and get you started. And that information is also in the show notes. Today's interview, Possibilities for Pleasure, is with Steve Oskard, pronouns he, him. Steve is a sex and relationship coach, a somatic therapist, and an embodied counselor. He works with clients to discover how we hold shame and trauma in our bodies. Working with individuals, couples, groups, and people of all gender expressions and sexual orientations, Steve works with clients to explore touch, movement, dialogue, breath, sound, and awareness as a way to find freedom in their sexual expression and entire lives. My intention with today's episode is that you will expand the joy that you have with sexual partners, expand the possibilities available to you to explore pleasure each day of your life, and grow the sensual relationship you have with yourself. Please go and follow Steve on Instagram at Steve_Oskard. Information is in the show notes. And now, let's see what he has to share with us. Hi, Steve. Good morning.
Good morning, Janice. We're in different time zones, so I think it's morning for me.
Yeah, one hour off. Steve is in LA. I am in Denver. We did get the chance to hang out a couple of months ago, which was really cool. And Steve and I are also involved in the same clubhouse room where we talk about dating and relationships and some of these things. And I was excited to invite you on for my Sexual Health Awareness Month series. You were one of the first people who came to mind.
Awesome. Because I talk about that all day long.
Fantastic. Well, I guess let's just get into it. We were just chatting, and I do know that you are involved with the whole somatic sex trend or movement or whatever it is that we want to call it, and that you are a somatic sex educator. So I think that a lot of my listeners, because they are, a lot of them are single, a lot of them are very self-reflective and exploratory and are listening to X-Files because they want to make the most of this time as a single person. And I think that your work could be very useful to people during this time. So I would love to talk about the different areas of your work. But first of all, I personally want to know and get to know you more and learn about you. I find you a very interesting person.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're very, very intriguing, Steve. And I would love to know, how did you get into somatic sex education, and what is that?
Great question. Well, we should probably start out with what the heck does somatic mean anyways, because so many people throw that term around. When I started as a bodywork, a massage therapist. I went to school in 1990 and trained in Chinese medicine and shiatsu, and then studied in all kinds of different massage techniques and modalities. And I became really fascinated with the body, but also how the body and mind work together. And they didn't really use the word somatics back then, a little bit, but not so much. It was really, they called it the body-mind connection. And then the word somatics started to become more and more prevalent to the point where nowadays it's very common, but still people don't quite know what it is. It really means of the body. Okay. And for how I work with it is how we hold our life story in our bodies, like not just the physicality of our body and the mechanics of the way our body works, but how we connect emotionally and how we hold our thoughts, feelings, and emotions in our sensate experience. So have you ever had something happen and the hair on the back of your neck stood up, you got the chills? That was in response to something you're experiencing in the world. Or if someone, if you feel close to someone, you feel a sense of warmth in different parts of your body. Certainly when it comes to sex, when we get aroused, we feel arousal in our bodies. And there's all kinds of nuances in word language that we use to describe it, but there's also nuances to the somatic language, the felt sense, the sensate experience, the tinglings, the warmth, the tightness, the expansion, the contraction, all the different sensate experiences that we just kind of don't really pay close attention to. Yeah. And a lot of times when I'm talking to people, I share, the more language that we have around anything, the more facility we have with it, the more ability we have to be fulfilled and enjoy whatever it is. So someone who studied music goes to the symphony, they hear something totally different than me. I didn't study classical music. I enjoy classical music, but that's not my jam. But when somebody who studied classical music, they hear the nuances way different from the way that I do. Yeah. Wow. I'm something that's coming to mind is that I used to /do practice orgasmic meditation. And part of the practice is sitting and describing every physical sensation that you can come up with, or during the practice, asking for very, very, very specific things from your partner. And I really gained a lot out of that. And I'm looking forward to talking with you about communication and how people can develop that if they don't necessarily practice orgasmic meditation and are not a somatic sex educator. So there's a couple definitions that I would like to go through, because I do really think that being single is a ripe time to explore some of these things and learn about it for the first time. So as a somatic sex educator, what do you see as your role? My role is really to invite people to tune into their bodies, and to do that in a whole range of different ways. Some of it might include dialogue, and a lot of therapeutic modalities and practices and exercises can be very much in our heads, but there are practices that actually invite us to tune in and feel our bodies. So a somatic sex educator particularly focuses on the area of arousal and pleasure, and tuning into what feels good. I use the word invitation because it's not like I'm taking you somewhere. See, if somebody was coming to me for just a general massage, they get on the table, they say, oh, my shoulder hurts, fix my shoulder. And then I go in and I work on their shoulder using the skills and the tools and the experience I have to apply to what's happening with their shoulder. But in somatic sex education, it's really the other way around. Someone says, oh, I'm having difficulty really feeling arousal in my body. And how it shows up is with my partner, I just don't get as turned on. So I might say, okay, well, what would you like to explore?
So you are doing talk therapy, which we'll talk about, but also hands-on work as well.
Exactly. So
wow.
I invite people to tune in and tell me what they think they need, even if they don't know.
Oh, I love
so
this.
I'm not really
I'm feeling the turn on.
Oh, yeah? Good.
Well, just because this just interests me so much. Yeah. And that's something that we are actually, trained in orgasmic meditation to recognize is just when you are curious, how you feel it in your body. And I can recognize that right now as I'm speaking with you.
And curiosity is one of the main tools that I encourage people to develop. It's something that we lose in many ways.
Yeah.
Remember when
especially,
we were children?
I guess. Mm-hmm.
We're curious about everything.
Another word that gets thrown around or used often these days is embodied counseling, embodied coaching, embodied many things. So I know that before we started recording, you said that you do embodied counseling. And I have to say, even as someone in this space, I have often wondered, people who use this term, why is it embodied? And what does that mean?
Yeah, it means tuning in with your body and listening to the wisdom of your body. So a lot of our lives are spent in our heads and thinking about things and working things through cognitively and, what should I do? And, managing my to-do list. And, even if I want to have a breakthrough in some area of my life, it starts up here. But what does our body tell us? And I think in some ways, there are some practitioners that lean all the way into the body and have the body be the only thing that leads us. But I think it's a real fascinating integration of how do we integrate our thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we verbalize with the sensate experience that we have in our bodies, and both kind of pull them apart a little bit as well as see how they work together.
Well, I mean, what you're describing to me and what I'm hearing sounds like intuition to me, because a lot of intuition goes with thoughts that run through your head combined with with your physical response to it, which is at least how I experience intuition.
Yeah. I think one of the things I am challenged by with the word intuition is people often say they use the word intuition when they have no other way to explain what they're experiencing. Okay. And then they just say, oh, it's just my intuition, rather than going deeper. Well, what are you sensing? What are you feeling? Well, I'm feeling warmth in my chest, or I'm feeling just drawn to this person. I want to lean in when I'm with them. There's something about them that has me feels familiar, like I feel at ease around them. Oh, what does that mean? So just inviting people into a dialogue with their own body so that they can be curious, like you said, curiosity, let that guide you.
And I guess the more that we learn to put it into more expansive terms or words, the more we can communicate, or the better that we can communicate with others.
Yeah.
And which leads into my next question. And that is, I hear the term embodied sex used a lot. So what is embodied sex? And if you don't mind, well, actually, first, I'll let you answer the question, and then I'll ask my follow-up question.
Yeah, well, I'll answer it by describing what the opposite of embodied sex is. And this is not a way to dismiss it, because it's very pleasurable for a lot of people, and myself included, but it's just one of the flavors of sex, and that would be fucking. And I usually call it sport fucking, where you're just fucking to get off.
Yeah, penetrative mostly.
Yeah. And or not just that, but also you could even with self-pleasure, where your goal is to go from zero to climax as quickly as possible.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, thank you.
It's like reaching for climax. That is one form and one flavor of sex. Embodied sex and body sexuality is exploring the whole range. So when we think of the opposite, it would be fast and hard and try to get to 0 to 10 as quickly as possible. If you look at the complete opposite. It's slow and meandering and feeling the nuances of pleasure in my own body, sharing that with my partner, asking them for things, offering things, giving them pleasure, asking for pleasure, this whole give and take. So that would be the slow end of the thing, the spectrum. And then fast is quickly, and how to stimulate myself to climax as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Now, both of those can be wonderful, and that could even be embodied as well. But it's the ability to tune in and be conscious of what you're experiencing in different parts of your body. I think in many ways, sex becomes very genital focused.
I'm glad you're saying that, because my follow-up question was specifically men having more embodied sex, because I think that because men are often exposed to porn at an early age, and sex is so heavily in the media and in society and in porn focused on getting off. And I think that perhaps a lot of men just don't really know what else is available and what else they could experience. So what would you say to a man about exploring more embodied sex, and where to start?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to, so I work with all genders,
right?
all
Yeah,
sexual orientations. And I've noticed that, yes, there are some commonalities with, women, there's some commonalities with men, but I generally try to take the gender out of the equation, and speak to people around their own sexuality, because there are women who all they are aware of is 0 to 10 as quickly as possible. And if you think about it, when we learn about sex, we aren't afforded the opportunity, most of us, to have a sense of curiosity and playfulness. Everything else in our lives, climbing trees, playing house, all those things that we did as children was filled with curiosity. And in fact, even for us as children, our relationship to our own genitals was playful. But then there comes this period of time where we start to understand that there's something else about my genitals that aren't just doesn't feel good. You actually start to connect it to sex. You realize, oh, there's something about this that is sex. And you also already at that point, most of us have shame connected to it. Our parents may have told us, don't touch ourselves that way, or don't do that. Or there might be some religious experience around sexuality and conversations that we overheard, some cultural shame, but it all becomes our personal shame blueprint. I've never used that term before. Shame blueprint. Like this is how I inherited shame. I got it from the world around me. So when it comes to actually learning about my own body, and when we first explore self-pleasure and masturbation, it's usually quickly, quietly, and hide it. So we then have our first experiences with partners, and we have this idea, well, I should know what I'm doing. No one knows what they're doing the first time. Even if they've watched porn or they watched seen sex before, we don't know what we're doing. We're doing because we've never been there. Well, when we were younger and playing in the sandbox and we didn't know what we were doing, that was not a problem. But for some reason, when it comes to sexuality, we think we should know what we're doing. We fake it till we make it, right? So, but we still have that same template of quickly and quietly and kind of keep it hidden. So we don't have conversations about it. We don't talk about it. We say, well, what do you like? Why don't you show me how you like to be touched? How do you touch yourself? What's playful for you? What feels good to you? What parts of your body feel really good? And then here, let me show you, where we're just kind of like, oh, cool. So that way I'm responsible for my pleasure. I already know a little bit. You are responsible for yours. And when we do finally come together, we're sharing pleasure and exploring together. And I think most of us, and certainly most porn does not demonstrate that. Porn follows a very specific script. Mm-hmm. A few minutes of this, a few minutes of this, and then we reach climax.
Yes, totally. And it is very, I won't get into it right now, but I'm really glad that you brought up the concept of pleasure being a personal responsibility, because that was something that I was looking forward to discussing with you. Mm-hmm. It's one of my kind of favorite concepts. To me, it makes a lot of sense because of my own background and the things that I've been involved with in my own practices. But I do know that it is not a concept that a lot of people are familiar with. I know for a fact, because I've spoken with many of my friends about this, that a lot of people don't even know what it means. And it's so important, and it can be so transformative. And so I would love for you to tell me, what does that mean to you? And how can people take more responsibility for their own pleasure?
Well, I think the first place is to explore self-pleasure. What feels good to me? And it doesn't have to be limited to sexuality, and doesn't have to be only about masturbation. It could be about your yoga class and how you feel in those last few moments in Shavasana when your body's tingling. It feels like you're floating off the mat. That's pleasure. And before that moment creeps in where you realize, oh shoot, I gotta get out to my car before I get a ticket. If you're in a yoga studio, whatever, I live in Los Angeles. You're like, oh God, I bet, the class is over and I only had 3 seconds left on my meter. Whatever it is that takes us out of it in those moments. And why I think yoga is a great example is because you're connecting your breath to your movement, to your awareness. And those are the three of the 5, and there's more, but 3 of the 5 key elements of embodiment is our breath, movement, and placement of awareness. And then I also use sound and touch. And sometimes I use smell and taste as well, but really tools to tune in. And when you're doing yoga, or you can actually do this with any kind of workout or exercise, any kind of movement, you're tuning into your breath. You're putting your awareness at different parts of your body at different times, different postures, have you focus on different things. So yoga is a great example because it's designed to tune in, as opposed to the opposite when somebody's at the gym, at the treadmill, just kind of staring at the, the TV monitor. And some people do that with yoga. They tune out and they just do the moves. Some people are on the treadmill tuned in. So it's not exclusive to yoga. It's not exclusive to running. And it's not limited. You can actually have your sexual practice be one of tuning in. So if you start with self-pleasure and your goal is to reach climax, that's called reaching for climax. That's called getting the job done. That's goal-oriented. Whereas looking for and exploring pleasure and taking your time and trying new things and experimenting. One of the trainings I took was on masturbation coaching. And the first time I was working with someone, and they were coaching me. They said, okay, stand up. And I'm like, what? Now this was not, they were not watching me, but they were saying this, they were coaching me on a practice to do on my own. I was like, stand up? I haven't stood up since I was in a hurry as a teenager. I didn't have any privacy. So I thought, okay, well, let's try different things. You always use one hand, try your other. So it's a matter of learning by sense and feeling what feels good when I've assumed I know how to get from 0 to 10.
I am so fascinated by this, and I need to learn more about this because I do work with so many single people, and I've been interested in sexology for so long, and I think that this could be a new avenue for me. And I'm glad that you brought it up too, because of my audience. And you're talking about several different things that involve unpartnered pleasure or pleasure without a partner. So what would you suggest to listeners who are single? Because this is such a ripe time for, like I've said a couple times, for really embracing your sexuality in a completely new way. What would you say to single people as far as how to do this, whether if you're dating casually or not dating at all? Because I do think a lot of people, it will be challenging for them to see how you could explore pleasure and sexuality without a partner, or after a breakup, or during your single time. So how can that be done?
I'm going to say one thing about pleasure first, but I will answer this question. Pleasure is built into our nervous system. It's not just some random thing. And I think in many ways, culturally, we've evolved to think of this pleasure as frivolous, but it's actually built into our nervous system. And I don't have evidence for this part of it, but I think it's partly to reset our nervous system, to have a feeling of calm and pleasure and something that feels good allows our nervous system to come down to a baseline and down regulate some. Whereas if I'm going about my day-to-day business and driving in traffic and my nervous system is getting upregulated and tight, and rightfully so in some circumstances, I got to be able to watch for the person crossing the street if I'm driving and the other cars. But to come home and, some people it's just to take a deep breath. For some people, it's do yoga. For some people, it's to work out. Well, what about pleasure? Pleasure could actually be a practice. We actually set aside time and consciously choose pleasure and choose to pleasure yourself, not necessarily with a goal of reaching climax, but with a goal of exploring your body. You could just spend a whole time fully clothed, stretching your body and feeling how good it feels. Like I worked out at the gym yesterday and I have some sore spots in my body. And it's like, oh yeah, I worked hard here. And if I just massage that a little bit, that feels really good. Mm-hmm. And do I do that so I avoid feeling bad? Or do I do it because it feels good? I don't know. The context is different.
Yeah. Pleasure for pleasure's sake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. You said it better than I did.
Well, because I live a desire-led life. And so I understand this. And I often talk about how, I always spoil myself every single morning. I always make my coffee and then get back into bed and read a book, because to me, that is just, kind of the top of indulgence as far as how you start your day goes.
Yeah, but that's a pleasure practice. And you call it an indulgence. And look at how we relate to indulgence. We think, I'm guilty for it. Okay. No, I'm taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. I'm nourishing my body. I'm having my coffee. You would say coffee.
Yes.
Coffee. And I'm reading a book and I'm cuddled in bed. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm by myself, I'm serving my soul here.
Mm-hmm. For no other reason. I mean, I've got lots of shit to do every day, but it just feels good.
Yes. And it nourishes your body and your soul.
Yes.
It nourishes you to do that. So it's not indulgent.
Okay. A little reframe there, which is
some people love the word.
Well, yeah, I guess I also like to say spoiling myself. I see what you're saying, though, is I don't have to put it in those terms as though I'm doing something out of the ordinary. It's a practice for me. It's a part of my daily routine. Pleasure practice. I like that. Yeah. And this is actually a good segue into communication. Mm-hmm. I know, because I know you, that this is a very big part of your work. It's something that you're very passionate about. And I think that when people think about healthy sex and better sex and having better relationships, intellectually, people understand that communication is important.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to put it into practice. And even with someone that you've been with for a long time. So how can we normalize conversations around sex so that we can learn and explore? And what might you say to someone who feels nervous and uncomfortable with it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think in terms of our relationship with ourselves, once you've actually started this pleasure practice, you're not actually verbalizing what it is that feels good. So one thing to consider is, how might I start talking about what feels good to me? Because when I am with a partner, I want to be able to say, oh, I'll give a great example. I remember the first time I had a partner who kissed my ears, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. My ears I never knew how sensitive my ears were and how turned on I got. And they were kissing my ears and I could feel the warmth of their breath. And they were just using their tongue to lightly kiss around I was going nuts. Good thing
I like that too.
Didn't think I didn't have a blank check there. They could have taken everything. I mean, I was in heaven. And then the next time I was with a different partner, and I had mentioned how much I enjoy that, they started kissing my ears, and it was sloppy, wet kisses. I was like, oh. And what did I do? Nothing. I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
I didn't say, oh, can I tell you how I like it? Will you do it this way? Without telling them that I don't like. I mean, I don't want to insult them. They're just doing what they're doing. I already told them that I loved it. And this was how they thought, what they thought of when I said I loved it. So I was too ashamed to actually say, oh, not this, but this. Mm-hmm. This is the way I like it. I was too embarrassed to, they were doing their best. The truth is, they probably would have loved the adjustment.
Oh, yes. And I love that you're using that term. We use that term in orgasmic meditation as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's not like I'm telling them, you fool, why would you do it that way? No, I'm just saying, oh, I like it this way. So, but if I've never put the words together and heard them come out of my own mouth, and I have a little bit of shame that's kind of, or embarrassment that's tamping it down, then I have no practice actually asking for what I want. And I think that's one of the key things that one, knowing what we want, two, actually knowing how to put it into words, and then actually having the courage to ask for that. And I think, a lot of times I have a lot of exercises and games that I share with my clients, especially couples, so that they can practice communicating. They could see, why don't I ask for what I want? Oh, I'm afraid of this, or I'm embarrassed about that. And so a lot of people end up, asking for what they think their partner wants to give them rather than what they truly want.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think a single person can do to practice this? Because I know a lot of people look forward to coupled sex, look forward to partnership, and it's something that they have a lot of ambition around. And so how can we kind of prepare as single people for this?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because I hadn't really thought of it in terms of that, because integration is one of the most useful pieces, and basically that all that really is reflection. So if you've adopted a self-pleasure practice, when you complete the practice, to actually reflect on, what was it that was great? What was it that I liked? What would I like more of? What might I try different next time? So if all I have is my own self-pleasure practice and I don't have a partner to explore with, integration is just as important. And some people might want to journal about it. It's like, oh, this was good. I have a friend who's also a sex educator who said she used to do that when she was a teenager. She had this whole list of things she wanted to try. I was like, damn, you were on top of it when you were young.
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine. I was raised, I think I was raised in the LDS church, and I can't even fathom having done that as a teenager, but good for her. And, that is definitely something that everybody can incorporate into their lives, single or partnered. And is this what you're talking about when you talk about cultivating a vocabulary for pleasure?
Yeah.
Is the actual either documenting or thinking about it and getting specific?
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. And it's really that part of it where it's an integration of the sensate experience. Like you just spent 10 minutes just stretching or moving or touching yourself or doing something and trying something new or doing this and that. And some of it felt great. Some of it felt pretty good. Some of it was like, never going to do that again. But putting it into words, and either if you are with a partner, verbalizing it, or just thinking about it, or even writing it down, is part of integrating it into your experience. And it is about really cultivating the word vocabulary with the sensate vocabulary. Mm-hmm.
And do you think, besides learning about what you like and learning about pleasure and desire, do you think that, and I know I'm going off script here, but do you think that there's any way that people can process grief or anger or anything related to a breakup through a pleasure practice, and and what would that look like?
For sure. And I think you've touched on it with, you've said you practice orgasmic meditation. That's a lot of people will touch upon deep emotions during an experience of high sensation. So or even low sensation for that matter. They're feeling pleasure, they're feeling stimulation in their body. And I think that and again, I don't have evidence for this, and I don't know that anyone's really talked about it in depth in the world of somatics, but people will often say certain locations represent certain things. Well, I don't think that's actually accurate. In my experience, it's the sensate experience that evokes a memory. There's a sensate experience that's a stimulation that communicates through the nervous system up into the brain. Then the brain's like, oh, that's like this. The brain will make a connection. Oh, that reminds me of grief, or that reminds me of pleasure right before grief, or that reminds me about this that happened after that. So it's, our brain is not a really clear filing system where somebody else could go in there and look under Z, 1983, this happened. No, it's actually, and you wouldn't be able to actually find the exact memory, but you have pictures and thoughts and images and emotions and body sensations. So you feel a body sensation and it reminds you of a moment in time. Or you think of a moment in time and it reminds you of a body sensation. So it's like, it's not a cause and effect thing that's really obvious. So when processing and moving through grief in our bodies, for sure, it's a way that people can access their history, whether that was trauma or whether that was drama or whether that was pleasure or whether that was joy, whether it was melancholy or whether it was nostalgia. I was just thinking about, where I went to school, and just the other day, I was like, I haven't been to high school in many years. I was just thinking about walking on the grass around the campus. And it was just something like, oh yeah, I remember the fall, what it was like going back to school and walking through the grass and the baseball diamond. And, it's just like, oh yeah. And I used to walk a lot because I lived in an area where there was a lot of walking.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in Maryland.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You're a long way from home.
Yeah. Columbia, Maryland. It was a wonderful city that was planned with walking paths and village centers and man-made lakes. And so it was great to grow up in that environment. So I did a lot of walking. So I could be nostalgic about that, and it could evoke a body sensation at the same time.
Yeah. I'm glad you're mentioning walking, because that's a part of my pleasure practice. I love walking so much, and I love being outside in the morning. And I walk a lot. I think I got 15,000 steps in yesterday.
Awesome.
So, not why we're here, though. I wanted to go on with the topic of vocabulary and language, and I'm not sure if I was going to ask you this, but something that's come up in our clubhouse room a little bit is sexual performance, or should I say sexual quote unquote performance. And I know that is not maybe not your favorite term or not your favorite way to look at it. So I have a two-part question.
Okay.
First of all, we are here to educate listeners. So what would you say is a better word or term for sexual performance that you would prefer to see people use?
What do you mean specifically? Because when people say that, does that mean like you dismount and the Russian judge gives you a 9.5 and the Swedish judge gives you a 9.6? I mean, who's judging here, and what is it? Mostly when I hear about it, it's about the man being able to get and maintain an erection.
Yeah, well, I suppose, yes, maintaining an erection, and I suppose how long they go as well.
Got it. So that's mostly what I encounter when people talk about performance. They want to be able to last long enough so their partner gets pleasure. And sometimes not even that. They think there's a certain random amount of time that they should be able to last that proves that they're good, a man, I don't know what it is, but there's some kind of arbitrary number or length of time, or the feeling of having a firm erection should last this long. And I think some of that also goes to what people may see in porn, where the person's erection lasts for a long time and they're able to, have penetrative sex for a long period of time. Well, that's a performer. That is a performer. When
an actual performer. You're right.
So it's not real life. So in real life, what happens is when you get aroused, blood flows to your genitals, Whether you have a penis or a vulva, your blood flows to that area, and the erectile tissue gets engorged. That's what happens when you get turned on, you're aroused. And sometimes you get an erection that's firm, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it lasts for a few minutes, and then it subsides, and then it get erect again. So there's no normal. There's no way that it should be. And I think also for men in particular, we relate to our bodies when we were younger. And in our preteen years or our teen years in our 20s, when our testosterone levels are higher, those we tend to have a lot of random and more firm erections during those periods. Some people continue to throughout the rest of their lives, but that is a period of time when the testosterone in our system is higher. We're producing more testosterone at those times because we're growing the most at those periods of our lives. So we tend to think of having an erection like that. In fact, I'm sure every guy could tell you they were always called to answer a question on the board in front of the room, and of course, random.
Yes.
What am I going to do?
Right.
Oh no!
Yeah. What am I going to do?
Yes. I've yet to know any young person who stood up and proudly walked to the front of the room.
Right. Oh, and I guess that goes back to the shame factor that probably lives inside of many men's bodies.
Yeah. So I think we also relate to, I should be able to have an erection like I did then. And then it doesn't account for all the myriad of issues that might affect our arousal. And I separate arousal from engorgement. Our engorgement is what's happening physiologically with the erectile tissues. That's blood flow. Getting an erection is blood flow. Getting for a person with a vulva is engorgement and having the whole vulva and all the labia and getting erect and engorged and filled with blood, and actually having the vagina get lubricated. That's all part of the arousal process. But it's all part of the physiological part of it. But arousal is something different. You can be totally turned on and not have an erection. You could be totally turned on and not notice your genitals. So how we place our awareness, again, is a way to actually bring sensation and awareness of sensation into our bodies. And you could have a tremendous amount of pleasure with or without an erection. Yeah.
This is, you keep on just segueing so perfectly into the next thing I want to ask you. And, even for women, there's many visible signs that people go for as far as whether or not she or they are enjoying it and quote unquote performing. And for instance, there's been a very heavy emphasis on squirting more recently, I've noticed. And, of course, a lot of people do consider the lubrication or the wetness to be a sign that she's turned on and ready and wanting it. But I know your approach is more normalizing or more emphasis on slow touching and things that we don't really see in porn and that really have nothing to do with what is going on with our genitals. So can you talk a bit about that? And why do you find this so compelling? Because I know that this is kind of a thing for you is slow, soft touching. So why is that?
Well, and we've talked about this in different clubhouse rooms quite a bit because everybody comes in, they have a question about squirting or some of the more sensational sexual experiences and acts. Yeah. And, including kink. And I love kink, and I support people in their relationships who want to explore that. But if you look at that kind of sensate experience, it's high sensation. And people are predisposed to that from what we've learned about sex. That is quick, it's fast, it's high sensation, stimulate my genitals, high stimulation. So, and squirting would be in the neighborhood as well, doing high stimulation to see if we can produce a result. It's goal oriented. It's about trying to get somewhere. And that's exciting. That's fun. That's awesome. But it's this part of the pie And I think so many of us forget this part. And I promise, if you can master slow and sensual and add that to the spectrum of your body's receptors, add that to the spectrum of what you can experience. Like I used the word, you used the term, expanding our vocabulary of experience. If we just focus on high sensation, fast and furious fucking, then it's one note. It's like going to a concert and hearing them play one note.
Yeah, or one song over and over.
One song over and over. Exactly. And it's like, wait a minute, what about, I can't remember, there's a couple of hard rock, metal bands who did a soft song. What is the, there's one that's really More Than Words. You know that song?
Oh my God. I knew you were going to say that. You're so right.
It's such a great love song, but that band is all pretty much metal. And then they released this song that's like, holy God, I didn't even know any of their other stuff. I listened to their other stuff because I love that song, thinking that it was going to be melodic and sweet and loving and love songs. And I was like, oh, this is all heavy metal. But like, what if you could expand your capacity, your vocabulary of sensation and pleasure? You can always go, I'm not saying exclude the stuff that are exciting. And, it's kind of like going to the amusement park and riding the crazy ride all the time. Why not go and ride the teacups?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. And also you mentioned talk, which is definitely a thing for me. I'm a writer, but I don't even know if it has to do with being a writer. I just think that I've learned over time that I get very aroused by, the sexy texts or voicemails or someone saying things to me. How can we integrate more talk into our sex lives? What would you say might be a starting point as far as that goes? Like, what would you say to a client about talk and foreplay?
Yeah. First of all, I definitely will rewind just a touch to talk about consent. Because if you're with a new partner and all of a sudden you send some kind of text that is, let's just say it's a little more than suggestive, and you haven't kissed yet. Like, let's say we went on a couple dates, we flirted, but we haven't quite kissed. Maybe we're going slow. Who knows? We haven't progressed somewhere. And then I start sending you something more erotic than we're ready for. That's going to kind of blow you out of the water. It's like, wait a minute, this guy's, we haven't kissed yet, and he's already talking about sex acts. So especially if you're flirting with voicemail messages or text messages, or even in the third date or whatever, you always have to be calibrating the conversation to feel for what's right for our level of intimacy right now.
And how would you suggest going about that?
I would say there's no formula for it.
Okay.
You could, you could do it. The old model is really you test the waters and someone makes the first move. Same thing as someone makes the first move to hold hands or kiss, or someone's going to make the first move. So that's the old model. There are other options though. You could actually have a conversation about it. Maybe on that third date, you say, listen, I like where this is going. Can we talk about touching? I really love touching. Are you ready for that? Now, some would say, that takes the seduction out of it. It's not romantic. And, the guy's supposed to make a move. And well, maybe, but that's an old model.
Yeah, I agree. I still, though, hear female friends mostly saying that they really want a partner who can intuit, what they want, and that it's not as fun or whatever for them to have to, I'm putting this in quotes, have to ask. And I mean, what do you think that's about?
I think it's mostly conditioning. I think we're conditioned to the guy makes the move. That's kind of the model, the heteronormative model that we inherited. And I think it's even present in same-sex couples or in non-binary. When someone identifies as non-binary and they're in a relationship with someone, it's still expected that someone is going to make the move. Someone is going to be the top and someone's going to be the bottom. Someone's going to be more dominant. Someone's going to be more submissive. That's the old model of relationships where someone leads and the other one kind of follows. That may switch, but we're starting to see that the whole landscape of relationships is changing.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the old model, it's not a bad model. Mm-hmm. That's where we get seduction and passion and grabbing your partner and taking them, or the desire to be taken. That's exciting. But we're also in a time where people are acknowledging their trauma verbally way more clearly. They're becoming aware of their past and their history of trauma. And they're actually bringing that into their conversation. So if I'm not attuned to you and I go to make that first move and you're not ready and you're actually aware of your trauma, it might not just be, oh, I'm not ready. And we're like, oh, okay, no problem. It might be, ooh, it might be the end of our third date and we're not going to have a fourth.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm actually thinking of even some recent experiences where that kind of happened, and I went from, interested to really just shut off really quickly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's where we all get to raise our level of being responsible, where you can now say, gosh, I really enjoyed our first 2 dates, but on that third date, you did X, Y, and Z, and I felt that was too much, so I just pulled back.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So I don't necessarily want to not see you again, but part of me doesn't want to see you again because I'm afraid that this will go the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, admittedly, that I'm really good at talking about what I do want, but I'm not as good at talking about what makes me uncomfortable with someone.
Yeah.
Something that I had really wanted to ask you was another hot topic is the quote unquote pleasure gap. And we were in the same clubhouse room last week, and Brian suggested the book, The Pleasure Gap, which I did order. I haven't started reading it yet, but it's on my nightstand, ready for tomorrow morning with my coffee. And I wanted to ask you about this because when it came up in our clubhouse room, you really quickly did a bit of a reframe. And I thought it was so valuable and it stood out to me because I don't think a lot of people actually know what the pleasure gap is. And I think even if you kind of understand that it means that women don't climax as much as their male partners, I think some people throw it around to be almost the notion that this is because of men, which I know is not the case. So I think because it is being a little bit misunderstood and not talked about in a rich way, that maybe you could say or let us know what you think about the pleasure gap and what we can actually do to address it.
Yeah, I will start with the second part because I think that would be most useful. And then I'll kind of give my thoughts on it because we've already touched on it. If I'm responsible for my pleasure and you're responsible for your pleasure, then we're coming together to share pleasure. It's not my job to help get you to climax. I can help. I can find out. I could, even if we don't verbally talk about it, I could be trying to give you pleasure and you could be guiding me and we could support you in getting there. I could support myself in getting there. So we can learn to communicate even without words about both claiming our pleasure, really enjoying the experience, and also take the goal of climax kind of off the high peak, the pedestal. And it's like, well, we may get there, we may not. I've been with partners where I haven't climaxed and I've had tremendous pleasure. Yeah. Where the focus isn't on climax. So that's one thing where we come together and share pleasure. We learn to ask for what we want. And then remember that starts with, well, what do I want? I don't know. I know what I wanted yesterday. I know what's worked in the past, but what do I want right now? How do I learn to tune into my body and see, well, gosh, I just want to cuddle tonight. I'm not too tired to have sex. So you actually, when you're tuned in, you actually know. It's like,
you're right.
I'm not in a hurry. I can have pleasure anytime. I'd love to share pleasure with you, but tonight I just want to cuddle, whatever it is. So being really tuned in to what you want, learning how to ask for it. The challenge I have with that whole dialogue is that it's making someone or something wrong.
I agree.
It's pointing the finger at and trying to find why is it this way. And there are some very good points about it.
Yeah.
About the history of pleasure in our country and in our culture. And that even goes back, beyond just this country, but it's like the history of pleasure and how we've suppressed pleasure. And I think there are some very good points that are kind of built into our way of thinking. But if you're looking to whose fault is it? And I'm not, and sometimes it just devolved to men being selfish and just taking for themselves. And that kind of, if you draw it out, it sounds like this. Yeah. It sounds like a bitter person blaming somebody for why they're not getting their orgasm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know it's way more nuanced than that. Mm-hmm. But if we all started to look together, it's like, how can we share pleasure?
Yeah. And it is very much about using your voice and communicating. I know often if I do have a female friend who, complains to me about this, I will automatically ask, what was it that you asked for? Mm-hmm. And usually they say nothing, Mm-hmm. So I thought this has just been so fantastic. I'm so glad I'm getting to know you more and really interested in learning some of these things for myself. And I keep on saying this, but I really think my career path might at some point take a little bit of a curve with some of this. The last question I have is what have you seen as far as personal transformation goes mm-hmm. from or out of people who you work with?
I have some clients who I just love working with them. And I'm trying to think. I think one of the key things is actually when someone first has a conversation with me, it's usually 10 to 15 minute just consult to see if I feel like a good fit for them.
Okay.
And a lot of times they have trouble even saying some of the words that identify what their issue is. Like they might hint around, I'm just having a hard time with arousal or whatever. And I'll say, do you mean getting an erection or getting and maintaining an erection? So I try to make it really safe for people while at the same time getting more and more specific to the point where after a few sessions, they're talking with me. And oftentimes someone will say, wow, it's just really easy to talk about this now. And, I even had a session with a client last week and you mentioned early on, some of my work might include touch. And this was a client, we didn't do any touch-based work, but we did some work. We were in person together that was movement-based and somatic exercises where I had her look to see what she noticed in her body, and she moved around the room a little bit, and I invited her to explore certain things. And she got so much out of the session, and we scheduled another session, and then she sent me an email and she said, I loved our session. These are the things that I got out of the session. It was really useful. It even made a difference in this place of my life. I can't remember the specifics, and she said, but I really think that I'd like to, moving forward, to work with a female practitioner.
Okay.
And I was like, awesome. First of all, that she could actually find her voice and say that was something huge to celebrate. Now, I'm not going to get to work with her. I'm disappointed because I loved our session. But I know that it's a very personal experience, and that even finding our voice to be able to acknowledge that is huge. This tiny little thing that seems like it might be insignificant is incredibly empowering. And I'll just say one thing that I often talk about, what I call the ABCs: agency, boundaries, and consent. And agency is so fundamental. What I say is agency is finding our voice, knowing our voice matters, and speaking with an intention that it be honored, and only being with people who will honor it. It's like, okay, you're not going to honor my voice, then I'm not going to play here.
Well, this is really important for my listeners because so many people want to be in a better or longer relationship in the future. Mm-hmm. And what I am often telling people is the more that you can use your voice and get better at setting boundaries, then the less likely you will be to get into a bad situation or into a bad relationship, because you'll be confident enough to execute your boundaries and confident enough to walk away from something that doesn't serve you or doesn't feel right. And it's also important because the more that you can get used to using your words, the more confident you will be and the better people that you will attract.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to make sure that everybody knows how to find you. And just to clarify, you work with people virtually?
I do. Yeah, I do work with people virtually on Zoom and sometimes on the phone.
That's great. Wow. Yeah. Whew, I'm fired up. Everybody go and look up Steve's work. Let us know what you thought. Thank you so much for being here today, Steve. Thank you for being a part of this series. Thank you for being a great colleague. I hope you won't mind when I get in touch with you to ask you for career advice.
Of course. Yeah.
And thank you for everything that you're doing. I really think that we need more men like you doing this work. And so I'm really appreciative about what you're offering the world.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. It's been so fun to be with you.
My pleasure. I mean, maybe we'll do it again sometime because I could see more topics. So yeah, let's definitely keep the conversation open. Thank you everyone for being here today. If you love this episode, go and let me know on Apple Podcasts by leaving me a 5-star rating and review. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to X-Files Podcast. I sincerely hope that you found today's episode inspirational or useful. I would love to support you on your healing journey. All you have to do is send me a message through the X-Files Instagram account, and I will personally be in touch to get you started. Remember, if you are struggling with a broken heart, your feelings are temporary. I am sending you so much love and luck for the week ahead. You've got this.